Arizona politicos sound out.
I'm a diehard Republican. I can't vote for Donald Trump. I'm not going to vote for Hillary.
The nominees helping or hurting party politics.
Donald Trump may be the greatest turnout machine for Democrat voters we have ever seen.
What's in store for the next 2 months?
Now it's a game of making sure that you don't have any unforced errors, and you should have the path to the presidency set.
Some of Arizona's best political strategists weigh in on what's becoming a historic campaign. This is Arizona Week. Hello, and thanks for joining us. This election is unlike any we've seen before, the campaign dominating the airwaves and conversations. Today, a discussion among 3 political strategists and what they think will happen before America elects its next president. Here we are, a conservative state traditionally. Are things about to shift in Arizona?
I don't think so. I think that the Democrats have for years, since the late 90s, talked about how Arizona was going to shift. And this started in 1996 when Bill Clinton won the state. The only reason he won Arizona is because Ross Perot pulled so much of a vote away from George Bush to provide that win and for it to happen, or in 1992. And so as we got to the late 90s, people said, oh, the Hispanic growth is going to change the dynamics, the demographics are going to change. And at the time I said, yes, it will change in a couple of decades. It's not going to happen anytime soon. So here we are today. Donald Trump's the nominee. There's a lot of talk about, oh, it's going to inflame the Latino turnout. The Latino turnout might spike a little bit. There probably be a handful, but for every new Latino voter that Trump drives out to vote against him, a white-collar Democrat's going to vote for him, or a blue-collar Democrat's going to vote for him. So at the end of the day, Trump's going to win Arizona, probably pretty handily. And in the future, probably in 2024, I think is when we'll probably start to see an actual shift in the demographics where Democrats have a real opportunity to take the state blue, unless Republicans can figure out a way to embrace, a younger population and a Hispanic population into their ranks.
Jason, do you think Hillary's about to take Arizona this election?
Well, I agree that the Democrats talk about it every year, and it's one of our talking points that we have during every election cycle, that, we're going to get the youth to vote, we're going to get the Hispanics to vote, and it rarely happens. What is a little bit different about this cycle, though, is that we have time to focus on really getting the turnout to engage. We don't have to really engage in any policy discussions or have people trying to accept our candidate. We know what's going on. We have 3 months to really kind of move bodies now. What is going to be a problem, though, is that I rarely see people turn out to vote against somebody. And they usually turn out to vote for something, which is where we're in kind of a problem right now, because there's not a lot of people who are very accepting of Clinton as their candidate. So that could be the problem where, once again, we've been a lot of talk and have little to show for it in November.
Matthew, Donald Trump has said things that have even made conservatives cringe. Does that help or hurt him right now?
Oh, of course it hurts him. He has shot himself in the foot multiple times. This is a candidate who is losing minority voters by 60 points. I mean, that's an incredible margin. He's losing college-educated whites by large numbers, by double digits. He's losing women by 15 points. So I agree with Sean that this time with the Latino vote, when Arizona goes blue, is not here yet. But Donald Trump may be the greatest turnout machine for Democrat voters we have ever seen. And his rhetoric, I don't know that Hillary can win Arizona this year, but he's pushing so many voters into the Democrat column. I think that he is fast forwarding the degree to which Arizona begins to shift.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, I don't know that he's pushing voters into the Democrat column as much as he's like, I'm a diehard Republican. I can't vote for Donald Trump. I'm not going to vote for Hillary. So, I have the luck. I'm lucky to be in a state where I know Donald Trump's going to win. So my vote, I can be principled and I can vote my conscience. I'm going to write in Marco Rubio probably. But the point is that he is abandoning conservative principles. He actually never had conservative principles. If you watch his convention speech, I tweeted at the time, this is a 1960s throwback Democrat National Convention speech. He was talking about using government to create jobs, big programs. He put Obama's stimulus package to shame. This is a big government, I'm the guy that's going to solve all the problems. So it's not only is it big government and the Democrat philosophy, but it's also very much, I'm the guy that's going to get it done. So he's totally taking the executive branch to a new level. And I think that's frightening.
But when I talk about pushing voters into the Democrat column, I'm not talking about folks like Sean. I'm talking about your, let's say, a Latino voter, maybe Catholic, maybe they've got conservative social views, right? Maybe they oppose abortion. They're hardworking and they have values that would put them more in line with maybe a Republican candidate. But they look at the standard bearer of the Republican Party in 2016 and say, I can't vote, that is not my home. That party is not where I belong. They're going to end up in the Democrat column this year and maybe going forward. That's the true risk here to the GOP.
And Donald Trump has really opened up that door to make it happen, because in Arizona, the Democrats really haven't spent the time or money here to really engage and talk to those voters. But he has now opened the door where the Democrats are saying, hey, you know, we're winning across the board in the nation. Let's see how much money we can spend in Arizona and start laying that groundwork. And that's where it's going to pay off in 2020, 2024, and really accelerate the timeline of Democrats having an impact here in Arizona.
Jason, this is the first female nominee for the Democrats. Is she running the right campaign against such huge star power in Donald Trump?
I think she's running a great campaign right now against Donald Trump. I mean, the numbers say it. You have an unpopular candidate, yet with Donald Trump, who's created the opportunity for her to basically just coast by. I mean, she's running the campaign that she needs to run to win. You know, keep her head down now and let the next 3 months go by without making any errors. I mean, now it's a game of making sure that you don't have any unforced errors, and you should have the path to the presidency set.
I mean, it tells you a little bit about the nature of what the political landscape looks like, that the person who's going to win the presidency is going to do it essentially by default. If she just doesn't screw it up, she'll win because this other guy is so bad. I mean, if she were running against almost anyone else, maybe not Ted Cruz, but if Marco Rubio were the nominee, she'd be dead and done right now. I mean, this would be Marco's walking into it without any question. I mean, the nation craves change and something new, and that's not Hillary Clinton. And Donald Trump is not exactly palatable to enough people to actually be the kind of change that they're looking for. Because I don't think he's changed either. I still think that this is a big hoax. I mean,
Wow.
he had a conversation with Bill Clinton the day before he announced for president. Then he announced this for president. And then he does everything that he could possibly do to sabotage his own nomination, probably not counting on the fact that people were so fed up with the establishment, and they were so many beta males looking for the alpha male to latch onto, that he became this popular guy and won the nomination. But now that he's won the nomination, he can't run the same kind of campaign and win, but he refuses to pivot and actually run a real campaign. I think Matt said it earlier, he's not running a real campaign. This
is not a hoax. I mean, we're running for president here, correct?
I don't know if I can go so far as to call it a hoax, but I will say, I think this is certainly the first campaign in my lifetime, and maybe the last time any of us will see it in any of our lifetimes, where a major political party fielded a nominee who's not running an actual campaign. He's not on air. He doesn't have he has no ads on air. Hillary Clinton is outspending him in these major states like Ohio 9-1 in airtime. He doesn't have field offices. There's no ground game. I mean, we've never seen anything like it. And there is part of me that wonders, this can't be real. This can't be serious.
He's a celebrity billionaire. So that being said, is that this part of maybe just this idea that he has this need for power, this desire to lead?
Well, I think if you've ever watched his show, he likes being in control. And I think it was a great idea, and he had this, you know, I'm going to become president of the United States of America, and everybody's going to think that I'm this great person. Yet when it comes down to the practicality of it, and he actually has to do the work on it, he doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to engage in the policy discussion that it's going to take. He doesn't want to be have the professional side of being the president of the United States to deal with. He just wants all the glitz and the glory, and that really comes off now that we actually have to engage in the policy discussion, and it can't just be the headlines that are selling him. He doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to engage in that policy discussion. And I think America, what we're seeing here is we really do need that. We can't just have somebody who's going to, you know, throw up the headline or give us the one-liner. We need somebody who's going to be able to engage in that discussion. And frankly, he's just not it.
I mean, he's rich, he has fame, he wants power. He picked the wrong country to run as president. I mean, this isn't the kind of place where a guy like his personality, I mean, he wants to be a dictator. I mean, he wants to be a Mussolini. He's in the wrong place.
More with those three in just a few minutes. Moving now to political polls. How accurate are the data, and what do surveys tell us about the elections? Here's Mike Noble, a pollster with OH Predictive Insights in Phoenix.
So what we do is figure out not only what the public is thinking, but also where we think they're going to go on the issues. And it's very interesting with polling is that I think we get a bad rap sometimes because technically anyone could really poll or be a pollster. The trick is figuring out who is likely to turn out to vote, especially in primary elections are a prime example. When you look at the numbers of primary elections, for example, here in Arizona, the numbers really don't change from presidential years to midterm years. And so it's really the same folks coming out to voting. So when you look at, we have, let's say, 1 million residents here, right? And then of those, 50% or so are registered to vote. Of those registered, you have these folks that are gonna actually come out and vote, but in a primary, you have Democrats, Republicans, Independents. So now it's even down to a smaller sliver. So how do we figure out, based on what we think the turnout is going to be and the folks that are likely to vote, where those folks are going to fall?
How do you collect this data? Is it over the phone?
Well, you collect it over the phone, but also you go based on their voter history. So if someone were to, if I know you voted 4 out of the last 4 elections, there's about a 95% chance you're probably going to be voting again, right? Or let's say you're voted out of the last 3 or 4, you're probably an 85% chance of voting. But as you go farther down the line, if you've never voted in election, what makes you think that you possibly are going to be coming out to vote now? And that's why I think you see the issues in polling is when they just say they sampled registered voters. Okay, well, it's great you're a registered voter, but are you going to be voting in this election? So based on voter history, but then you also ask in the beginning, so we know their history, but then we verify that, say, how likely are you to vote in this upcoming election? Unless you're very likely or likely, I don't think you should probably be taking the survey, in my opinion.
Some of the polls have been off when it comes to how Donald Trump is doing, how Hillary Clinton is doing. And that leads the American voter to question whether or not these polls are something we should even be talking about.
Correct. And so I think you hear from different angles, like I think the Trump campaign is saying these polls are wrong. And in some it may be, but overall, there definitely is a science to modern day polling. And yes, some folks are going to be wrong. And that's why it really comes down to the pollster and the methodology. So I think if you know in a certain district that there's a heavy Hispanic population, they're motivated to vote, you want to make sure that's represented in your sample. If you don't sample any of those Hispanics, you're going to be off because you have to take into account, because each district, each election has its own different demographic. So it's very interesting to see, why some folks, I saw one poll, I think the folks were off by 80 points. And also you got to look at is that, okay, have they been paid? Because I have yet to see a poll released where it wasn't good for their client if they were paid by them, right? So I think you want to look at folks that don't have a dog in the fight, because they're actually truly looking at the race compared to someone, let's say, if I'm paid X amount of dollars to do a poll, well, the chances, you could push someone any way you would like, and it's just how do you do it in an unbiased manner, I guess, is really the trick. And so I think that's something you got to look at if there's, personal interest involved. I think there could be, that's where you might see some of those issues.
One thing we hear is, who has time for polls? Who really are these people you're calling?
That is the other challenge that we've been finding and that we've been having to adapt. The older generation is more used to it, but also the younger generation not, and also with the conversion of how folks get their information. Before, everyone had a landline. Now it's very few. I mean, it's tough to find anybody under, I'd say, 30 that has a landline. So, you're seeing that more of a mixture of leaning towards cell phones compared to automated, and then also online surveys, which they're still working on perfecting. But yeah, you're seeing definitely a trend of that, folks just aren't as engaged, I think, as when they probably were 20, 30 years ago.
Are you tailoring your phone calls at a certain time because of people work?
Yeah, typically I'd say we usually would go in the evening. You typically stay away from Friday nights though. You always see low response times on weekends. People are out and about, typically running errands, don't have time. So usually the evening hours is best. Pollsters, yes, they get a bad rap, but it's being able to figure out, one, is there a motivation behind it? Because I have yet, one day, I'll give you a prime example. I released a poll in Arizona's 5th congressional district here, and there's 4 folks in the race. Well, only one can be number 1 in that poll, right? And so the 3 that weren't number 1 in the poll all said my numbers were bad, the poll is inaccurate, it's a bad poll, poking holes in it. But then, a month later I poll, and then the person that was in last was all of a sudden in first, and all of a sudden they didn't have any issue with the numbers. So it's interesting that I have yet to see the day when I release a poll that is bad for someone and they say, hey, that guy was right on, or that was a great poll, and vice versa. I mean, and I think it's the nature of politics, is that you'll get a lot of folks that poke holes, but I think what you have to base it on is that your reputation and record. I think for the presidential primaries, I was the closest in Arizona out of everyone, and I'm 1 for 1 on presidential primaries right now.
Going back now to our conversation with 3 of Arizona's top political strategists, Matt Benson and Jason Barraza from Veritas LLC, and Sean Noble from Axiom Public Affairs. This election, these nominees, they say, are challenging each party.
There's a wide array of conservative Republicans, people who would count themselves as conservative first and Republican second, that just say, look, this guy will destroy what we've built a lifetime trying to, or spent a lifetime trying to build and protect, and that is a conservative philosophy about the role of government. He's the antithesis of that in almost every way. And so if he gets elected, that's going to completely reshape what the conservative movement in the Republican Party looks like. I think that if he loses, which he likely will, there is a chance for the Republican Party to say, okay, wait a minute. We did the little experiment. It clearly doesn't work, so let's get back to normal and try to figure out what it is that we need to do so that we can mount a candidate against an incumbent Hillary Clinton in 2020 and take back the presidency.
Matt, who's the best candidate for Arizona when it comes to the economy, to education, to cross-border relations? Who's the best person?
Among those running for president?
Wow, okay.
Gary Johnson. I mean, the libertarian. He's actually, Gary Johnson was the governor of New Mexico, understands our part of the world. His running mate, Bill Weld, was a very successful governor in Massachusetts, both Republican governors, now running as the Libertarian ticket. Frankly, they are by far more superior in the kind of government that they would run and what they would do for the country than either a Clinton administration or a Trump administration, but they have no hope of winning.
Yeah, they are serious candidates. Unfortunately, if they can't hit the 15% threshold, they can't even get on the stage for the debates, which are, when most Americans are really going to be tuning in. So it's a sad place to be for those of us who, are right or center right.
Well, I think it's a little bit concerning, or at least I would be concerned from the Republican standpoint, in that, one, the candidate who did, does have our party's nomination, one, they stand up on the stage at their convention and have these big government principles that they're throwing out there, and two, that there's another political party out there that seems to be more in line with what we feel our ideals are. And I think there's something telling in that there's been a disconnect in kind of from the top to the treetops to the grassroots in the Republican Party, and that's how you ended up with Trump, coming up to power and gaining that nomination.
Yeah, I know that it's a standard talking point with the Democrats. No offense, but you guys created Trump. He's your problem. I actually believe it was Obama that created Trump. Obama came into office and immediately decided he had a Democrat Senate, Democrat House. He immediately decided he was going to do things very differently than previous presidents. When Reagan had a Democrat House and Senate, he worked very closely with Tip O'Neill to try to broker a compromise and to get things done. Obama decided he was going to cram through a stimulus package and he was going to cram through healthcare reform, and he did those things without any Republican support. I mean, he decided he was not going to sit down and negotiate. He was going to do it his way and no other way, and it cost the Democrats the majority in the House and Senate in 2010, or in the House in 2010, and so he's created an atmosphere where everyone feels like nothing's getting done, and this hostile nature, and so I think in many ways Obama in 2009, 2010 was the beginning of what became the phenomenon of the Trump supporter.
Well, and the other thing that has created it is the rise of I wouldn't even call it conservative media. It's the fringe, it's the Sean Hannity, Rush Limbaugh, it's the entertainment wing of the conservative media, which has created an entire generation of voters who believe that conservatives in Congress are all sellouts, who believe that it doesn't matter that a Democrat is in the White House, they should somehow force him to sign legislation undoing his landmark achievement with Obamacare.
Well, not only that, they both believe that they should force them to do it, but they don't even understand that you can't even get the bill to them because we don't have 60 votes in the Senate. They're not smart enough, and this is where I fault Ted Cruz, who never made the point, well, we can't get it through the Senate because we don't have 60 votes. And people just say, well, you have 55 Republican senators. Why don't you repeal Obamacare? Well, they don't understand the process. And it is, the Rush Limbaughs and the Sean Hannitys and the Breitbarts and the Drudges of the world have created a situation where we take the people who aren't as knowledgeable about the public policy process and feed them stuff that sets expectations that are completely unattainable, because that's not the way the process works.
Which is, as you said, maybe what happened 8 years ago.
Well,
Jason?
but I just want to address that. I don't think that it's necessarily Obama, and I wouldn't put everything in his court that has created this situation. But what has occurred, and I think it's on both sides of the aisle, is a dumbing down of the American political system and how it works and how we address it. But the mere fact that when something bad happens or that something we don't agree with is proposed, rather than actually engage in a policy discussion, we kind of throw bombs out there and like to yell and scream at each other, and that has created a situation where America and Americans aren't engaging or educating ourselves in the issues that our country has to face every day.
What does it say, though, that all these things have been happening and Donald Trump has been very popular with the American public? As we've heard, he's saying things.
I don't know that he's been very popular among the American public. He's been popular among just over half of the Republican primary voters. But even polling now, I mean, he's not popular. He's the least popular presidential candidate I think we've seen in a long, long time.
And the only one who comes close to him in unpopularity is Hillary Clinton.
If she wins, she will be, and either of them win. If either of them win, whichever one wins, goes into the White House with the lowest favorable ratings in the history of our nation as a president walking in the Oval Office on day one. It's going to be astounding.
Matt, what happens in November?
Hillary Clinton wins, and she wins by a wide margin. I mean, the polling that we're seeing just out today shows she's up 15 points in Virginia. She's up double digits in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Colorado. I mean, the only so-called swing states that are really, truly close at this point are Florida and Ohio. And she's pushing, in Iowa, and she's pushing into states like Arizona, Utah, Georgia. So the numbers, the trend line, it's still early. I mean, we're almost 3 months out, but the numbers are looking tremendously bad for Donald Trump.
The hard part for the Hillary campaign right now is going to be keeping voters engaged and keeping this still a story, because come November, they're going to have run the problem of people just not caring anymore. And they're still going to need people to show up and vote. And if they don't have those people showing up to vote after 3 months of hearing about, oh, well, Hillary's going to win, that's going to be a problem for them. So they need to be able to keep those voters engaged and willing to turn out in November.
Yeah, I agree. I think Hillary wins. I think what happens in the long term is people are going to be so disgusted by this election cycle that we're going to have a hard time getting participation rates in future elections anywhere close to where we've been historically. I think we are turning people off in droves, and it's going to be bad for democracy, bad for our system, and it's going to take a decade or more to fix.
Donald Trump's at the top of the Republican ticket in Arizona. How does that shake out throughout the rest of the races we have in Arizona coming up, Jason?
Well, one, it doesn't look good. I mean, there's the Trump effect. Is that going to turn off the Republican voters? And if they don't show up to vote for president, that's going to have a severe impact down ballot. I mean, in the last election cycle in 2014, we had Republicans that won by less than 1,000 votes in some legislative districts, Congresswoman who won by less than 200 votes. So any kind of decrease in the turnout for Republicans could have a large impact. However, you got to balance that against the unpopular Democratic candidate that not a lot of Democrats might show up to vote for. So, you know, I would agree that we're just going to have a low turnout, and what that means and how that affects it, I can't tell at this point. I think there's a danger, but I'm not seeing it. If we have that historic Hispanic turnout and the youth show up, yeah, there'll be a change. But
There goes.
That's just throwing,
there you go again.
And the independents too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The independents voter.
I mean, Senator McCain is going to win a re-election pretty handily. I think his race is very indicative of other Senate races across the country. They're outpolling Trump. They're going to do better than Trump. If Trump collapses, they're still going to win. I think Republicans hold the majority. You know, McCain wins. I think Ayotte wins in New Hampshire. You know, Portman wins in Ohio. Toomey probably wins in Pennsylvania. Rubio wins in Florida. So the only one that I would say, the two that are most at risk nationally in the Senate are Mark Kirk in Illinois and Ron Johnson in Wisconsin. But even Ron Johnson has a chance to pull this off. So it's going to be, you know, Trump will not have the drag effect that Democrats have been trying to pine for. You know, Republicans will hold the Senate.
I think the risk is, we all know that Donald Trump hates more than anything else to be a loser. And he has already been floating this notion that if I lose, it's because it was rigged, this is a rigged game, the election is, you know, the fix is in. If he sees if we get closer to Election Day, and remember, we start voting here in early October in Arizona and in other states, if it becomes clear that this thing is out of reach, I would be concerned, I am concerned, that he dispirits conservative voters and the Republican base and even his own people to the point that they don't turn out. And he would do it to try to save face that this election that is rigged and whatnot, not caring that it's going to damage Republicans all up and down the ticket if those voters don't turn out. Because let's face it, Donald Trump doesn't care about anybody other than Donald Trump.
I agree with that. I don't agree that it'll have that much impact, because I think Republican voters are still going to go vote for their down ballot people. I mean, they may hear what he says, but I mean, the typical voter is going to look at that and say, "Are you freaking kidding me?" What? And they will say, "This has been a hoax." But they're going to go out. They're going to say, a Republican voter at that point will say, "Well, we've got to have a check on Hillary, so I've got to vote for the Republican House member and the Republican senator."
Come 2020, does this position either party to say we've got to get that right candidate in now?
Well, the Democrats will be stuck with Clinton, and, you know, is she going to be a one-term president? I don't know. Maybe.
That'll be determined by Wentworth as soon as she steps into the White House, what she's doing and how the public receives that. I mean, she's got 3 months now, and then potentially 4 years to kind of start changing the perception of her and work on her favorability ratings. And we've seen swings in that, but I mean, she has got work to do.
And that concludes our program. Primaries are Tuesday, August 30th. Election results can be found on our website that night and into the next day on NPR 89.1, plus an analysis on next week's program. For all of us at Arizona Public Media, I'm Lorraine Rivera. Thanks for joining us.